Imagine this. It's 2 in the morning on your very first night at sea. You're half asleep when a deep rhythmic thump rattles through the ceiling. Then another, and another. You open your eyes to realize the nightclub sits directly above your cabin, and the bass line isn't stopping anytime soon. You paid $2,800 for this vacation, and now you're wondering how you'll survive 6 more nights of this. I worked on cruise ships for 4 years, and I saw this exact scenario unfold every single sailing. Guests would march to the front desk at dawn, desperate for a new room, only to find the ship was completely sold out. That one cabin choice, made because the price looked good, turned a dream trip into an expensive headache. Most people never look at deck plans before they book. They click the cheapest option, thinking all cabins are basically the same. But what they don't realize is that cruise ships are like floating cities, and one wrong address can mean sleepless nights, pounding headaches, or endless hallway noise that follows you from sunrise to midnight. A simple mistake can cost you hundreds in room change fees, or ruin the entire voyage you've waited months for. The cruise lines won't tell you this during booking, but there are 7 cabin locations that veteran crew members and frequent cruisers avoid like the plague. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which cabins to skip and what to look for instead. But before we dive into the 7 locations, let's make sure you understand why this matters more than you might think. Here's what you're going to walk away with today. By the end of this video, you'll know how to avoid the 7 most common cabin location mistakes that ruin otherwise perfect cruises. Things like non-stop noise from nightclubs, motion sickness from forward decks, endless hikes to dinner, and even safety issues you won't hear about from the cruise lines. This advice applies across Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Norwegian, MSC, Princess, and Celebrity ships, from brand new builds like Icon, Prima, and Celebration class to older favorites that keep sailing year after year. The layouts change, but the problem zones don't. I spent 4 years working on cruise ships, doing everything from guest services to behind-the-scenes operations, and I've heard every complaint you can imagine. According to Cruise Critic's annual cabin review data and vessel sanitation program reports, more than 60% of all cabin-related issues come from just 7 predictable locations. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to help you book smarter, save money, and actually enjoy your vacation. If you find this helpful, hit that subscribe button. I share insider cruise tips like this every week. Now let's set some ground rules so you know exactly what we're covering. This video focuses on the mainstream cruise lines: Royal Caribbean, Carnival, Norwegian, MSC, Princess, and Celebrity, because that's where nearly 80% of cruisers book their vacations. Luxury lines like Regent, Oceania, and Viking, along with river cruises, have entirely different layouts and guest dynamics, so the advice here is tailored specifically to large, resort-style ships. All examples and ship references are current as of 2025, including the newest updates for Icon of the Seas, the Prima class, and Celebration class vessels. Here's how this will work. We're going to walk through 7 specific cabin locations you should never book, why they're problematic, what most travelers don't realize until it's too late, and exactly what to do instead. Whether you're a first-timer, a family traveling with kids, a solo guest, or someone with accessibility needs, I'll highlight when a particular spot is especially risky for your situation. And stick around for number 7. It's the one mistake that can actually get you stuck in a dangerous situation during an emergency. All right, let's get into the first cabin location you should avoid at all costs. Cabin location number 1, directly below the Lido deck or main buffet. And trust me, this is worse than it sounds. The Lido deck is where the heartbeat of the ship lives. Buffets, pools, sun loungers, bars, and live entertainment that run from 6 in the morning until well past midnight. What most people don't realize is that all that energy travels straight through the floor into the cabins below. You'll hear chairs scraping, kids sprinting, crew pushing food carts, and, worst of all, the early morning deck cleaning crews with their industrial hoses and power washers starting long before sunrise. Here's the trap. Cruisers see a cabin directly under the Lido deck, say on deck 13, in the same category, but a few $100s cheaper than deck 9, and think they're scoring a deal. What actually happens? You're jolted awake at 6 a.m. every morning to the sound of metal legs grinding across the ceiling, and if you try to nap during sea days, forget it. That bargain becomes the most expensive sleep deprivation of your trip. You'll find this pattern across multiple lines. On Royal Caribbean's Oasis and Icon-class ships, Deck 15 cabins directly below the Windjammer buffet on Deck 16 are notoriously noisy. On Carnival's Celebration and Mardi Gras, skip Deck 13 beneath the Lido Marketplace on Deck 14. On Norwegian's Prima class, Deck 16 below Surfside on Deck 17 is a rookie mistake waiting to happen. This setup is especially punishing for families with napping kids, light sleepers, or anyone trying to recover from long-haul flights. Pro move: book at least 2 decks below any high-traffic public area. Deck 11 or lower is generally safe on most megaships, and cruise critics' cabin reviews back this up. Noise complaints spike dramatically in these top deck zones. But noise from above isn't the only problem. Sometimes the issue is what's happening right next door. Cabin location number 2. Right next to crew access doors, ship galleys, or laundry facilities. This is one of the most overlooked booking mistakes, and it can quietly turn your cabin into a 24/7 noise zone. Cruise ships don't sleep. Behind those crew-only doors, there's an entire world running non-stop to keep thousands of guests fed, supplied, and comfortable. But that constant motion comes at a price for anyone unlucky enough to book nearby. Here's what happens. Crew members move carts through heavy metal doors that slam shut hundreds of times a day. Laundry rooms run massive dryers that rumble like distant thunder, and galleys hum with dishwashers, fans, and clanging cookware, often starting as early as 4 a.m. You might not hear full conversations, but you'll hear the metallic rhythm of work that never stops. What most cruisers do: they pick a midship cabin thinking, perfect, less motion, easy access. What savvy cruisers do: they zoom in on the deck plan, spot the shaded gray crew access, galley, or laundry zones, and choose a cabin at least 2 or 3 doors away. It's the difference between peaceful sleep and feeling like you're living next to a backstage loading dock. On Royal Caribbean's Voyager and Freedom class ships, avoid cabins near the midship crew elevators marked with a C. On Carnival's older ships, skip the lower deck 2-3 cabins beside galleys. On MSC ships, look out for staff-only corridors near the aft. They're surprisingly close to guest areas. You'll hear clanging metal, high-pitched trolley wheels, and the muffled chaos of breakfast prep before dawn. Pro move: before you make final payment, open the deck plan PDF and scan for any operational zones. If your cabin is within 2 rooms of one, switch immediately. Light sleepers and families with babies, this one's critical. Now let's talk about a location that doesn't just disturb your sleep. It can make you physically ill. Cabin location number 3. Forward cabins on the lower decks, specifically Deck 2 through Deck 6 near the bow. If you're even slightly prone to motion sickness, this is the worst possible place you can be. Picture it. The ship cuts through open water, bow rising and falling with every wave, and your cabin moves with it. Up, down, forward, back, like a slow-motion elevator that never stops. What feels like gentle rocking midship becomes a relentless pitch up front, especially when seas get rough. Here's the physics. The bow is the pivot point that experiences the most vertical motion. The lower you go, the tighter the swing arc feels, which means more force on your inner ear. Combine forward plus low, and you've created the perfect storm for seasickness, even for people who've never felt it before. Common mistake. First-timers book a cheap inside cabin on Deck 3 forward because it's $600 less than midship. What actually happens? By the first sea day, they're queasy, missing excursions, and spending $200 on Dramamine, pressure bands, and ginger candies from the gift shop. That deal ends up costing more in misery than money. You'll notice this especially on Royal Caribbean's older Mariner and Navigator class ships, where Deck 3-4 forward cabins are notoriously rough in moderate seas. On Carnival's Fantasy and Spirit class ships, Deck 2 forward should be avoided entirely. Norwegian's Breakaway class, Deck 5 forward feels every swell. If you're a first-timer, elderly, or traveling with young kids who get carsick, steer clear of forward cabins below Deck 7. Even seasoned cruisers avoid them unless crossing calm waters in midsummer. Pro move: book midship cabins, ideally Deck 7 or higher, where motion is minimal. And if you're worried about rough seas, skip hurricane season in the Caribbean or winter crossings in the North Atlantic. According to CDC VSP data and passenger surveys, seasickness reports spike in these forward and aft lower deck zones. But while forward cabins make you sick, the next location might keep you up all night for a very different reason. Cabin location number 4. Directly below or above the ship's nightclub, theater, or casino. And yes, I said or above, because soundproofing on cruise ships is limited, and bass vibrations travel through steel decks like shockwaves. If you've ever lived near a club with paper-thin walls, imagine that, but with nowhere to escape. Here's what really happens. Nightclubs on megaships often run until 2 a.m. or later. Casinos operate around the clock once you're at sea, and main theaters host production shows loaded with bass-heavy music, pyrotechnics, and cheering crowds. Every beat, stomp, and stage cue echoes through the structure. Cabins located within one deck of these venues feel it all, like sleeping on top of a speaker. Common mistake. Cruisers see a cabin on deck 5 under the theater on deck 6 and think, how bad could it be? Reality check. From 8 p.m. to 11 p.m., your ceiling shakes during Broadway-style productions. From 11 p.m. to 2 a.m., the nightclub above turns your bed into a vibrating massage chair you didn't ask for. Specific warning zones? On Royal Caribbean's Oasis-class ships, skip deck 4 cabins beneath the Aqua Theater in the aft section. On Carnival's Mardi Gras, avoid deck 7 cabins under the Warehouse Arcade or near the Cloud 9 spa bars on deck 8. On Norwegian Epic, deck 6 to 7 near Bliss Ultra Lounge and Spice H2O is a noise trap. And on Icon of the Seas, deck 5 cabins under the Aquadome Entertainment area are already racking up early complaint reports. If you're a couple chasing peace and romance, or a family trying to get kids to sleep, this location will ruin your trip. Pro move. Study the deck plan, find where the nightclub, casino, and theater are, and book at least 2 decks away, ideally forward or aft of those zones. Pro tip. Those limited view or obstructed view cabins offered at a discount sometimes sit right above the entertainment venues. Read the fine print before you click book. Noise is one thing, but the next cabin location comes with a smell you won't forget. All right, we're halfway through the 7 worst cabin locations, and I hope you're taking notes, because what's coming next is even more important. If you're finding this helpful, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button and drop a comment telling me which cruise line you're sailing on next. I'll personally reply with cabin-specific tips so you can lock in the best spot before your sailing fills up. The next 3 locations aren't just about comfort. They're about safety, accessibility, and avoiding a situation that could cost you far more than money. Let's keep going. Now let's talk about a cabin location that comes with an unforgettable aroma. Cabin location number 5. Near trash chutes, anchor mechanisms, or tender boat loading areas. And yes, this is as unpleasant as it sounds. Cruise ships are floating cities, and like any city, they have to deal with waste, docking, and transportation, all of which happen in very specific, very noisy zones you don't want to sleep next to. Let's start with trash chutes. These vertical shafts run from upper decks down to the waste processing areas, and they're in constant use, especially after mealtimes. Every clank, slam, and rumble from those heavy doors can echo through adjacent cabins. Occasionally, when the chute doors open, you might even catch a faint whiff of kitchen waste, never the scent you want with your morning coffee. Anchor mechanisms are another hidden hazard. Usually located forward on deck 3-5, these enormous winches and chains grind and clank loudly whenever the ship docks or departs, often around 6 a.m. Common mistake. Cruisers book a guaranteed inside cabin, get assigned deck 4 forward, and wake up to the sound of a 15-ton anchor chain crashing into place every port day. It's startling enough to rattle the glassware. Then there are tender loading areas, typically aft on lower decks. These are where small boats ferry passengers ashore when the ship can't dock directly. That means early morning announcements, crew setting up safety gear, and diesel fumes drifting up from the boats below. Ship specifics? On Royal Caribbean's Liberty and Freedom class, avoid deck 3 to 4 forward cabins near anchor storage. On Carnival's Dream class, skip deck 1-2 aft near tender platforms. On Princess's Royal class, steer clear of deck 8 aft cabins near the trash chute zones. If you've got a sensitive nose, small kids, or you're a light sleeper, this is a deal breaker. Pro move. Study your deck plan and look for icons or gray shaded areas labeled anchor, tender, or utility. If your cabin is within 2 doors of one, move. Cruise critic forums are packed with travelers who learned this lesson the hard way. But if you thought noise and smells were bad, the next location can actually make it harder to evacuate during an emergency. Cabin location number 6. Far aft or far forward, away from the main stairwells and central elevator banks. This isn't just about convenience, it's about safety. On modern megaships stretching over 200 feet, booking too far from the center means every trip to dinner, the pool, or the theater turns into a workout you didn't plan for. Here's the problem. Those charmingly quiet end-of-hallway cabins. They can be a 5 to 7 minute walk, one way, from key areas like the main dining room or embarkation points. Multiply that by a few trips per day, and you'll easily log half an hour of walking before bedtime. Common mistake. Cruisers grab the cheapest far-aft cabin because it's $500 less. What actually happens? They spend their vacation trekking long corridors, their kids complain, and during the muster drill, they're scrambling to reach their assembly station. The safety concern is real. In an emergency, especially with rough seas, limited lighting, or thick smoke, the longer the corridor between you and a main stairwell, the more difficult evacuation becomes. Crew members train for this exact scenario, and they'll tell you, cabins near stairwells are faster and safer to clear. Ship specifics? On Royal Caribbean's Icon and Oasis class ships, avoid Deck 2-3 far-aft cabins, often numbered in the 7XXX or 9XXX ranges. On Carnival's Excel-class ships like Mardi Gras and Celebration, skip Deck 2 far-forward cabins near the Serenity Deck stairwell. On Norwegian Prima, Deck 6 far-aft cabins near the wake zone sound scenic, but require marathon-length walks. If you're traveling with kids, elderly parents, or anyone with mobility challenges, this setup can be exhausting fast. Seasick travelers should also avoid aft cabins. The motion is more pronounced there. Pro move. Book within 200 feet, or roughly 10 to 12 cabin numbers, of a midship stairwell or elevator bank. On your deck plan, look for the red stair icons and stay close. And here's a pro tip. During muster drills, crew track which cabins are slowest to arrive. Don't be that cabin. And now, the final cabin location, the one that combines almost every mistake we've covered. Cabin location number 7, and this is the big one. Obstructed view balcony cabins directly below lifeboats or structural overhangs. This is the mistake cruisers regret the most because you're paying for a view you don't actually get. Here's the setup. Every cruise ship has lifeboats mounted on certain decks, usually between decks 7 and 9. They hang outward, and the decks directly below often have balconies that sit beneath them. Cruise lines still market these as balcony cabins, but what they don't emphasize in those beautiful brochure photos is what your actual view will be: the underside of a bright orange lifeboat or a solid white steel overhang. It blocks sunlight, blocks your breeze, and blocks the ocean view you paid extra for. Common mistake. Cruisers see balcony cabin and a lower price, maybe $200 to $400 less, and assume they've found a hidden deal. What actually happens? They step onto their balcony and realize their ocean view is the bottom of a lifeboat 2 feet above their heads. No sunlight, no horizon, just shadows. And once you're on board, it's almost impossible to change cabins. Let's name names. On Royal Caribbean's Allure and Harmony of the Seas, avoid Deck 8 balcony cabins, 8XX series, sitting directly beneath Deck 9 lifeboats. On Carnival Panorama and Vista, skip Deck 7 aft balconies under Deck 8 lifeboat stations. On MSC's Meraviglia-class ships, Deck 9 cabins directly below the lifeboat platforms are the culprits. And on Norwegian Breakaway-class ships, those obstructed view Deck 8 balconies really mean obstructed. If you're celebrating an anniversary, honeymoon, or booking your first ever balcony, this mistake can absolutely ruin the experience. Pro move. Before you book, pull up your ship's deck plan and look for small lifeboat icons. If your cabin sits right below that row, keep scrolling. And here's a top-tier hack. If a balcony cabin seems suspiciously cheaper, Google ship name plus cabin number plus lifeboat. You'll almost always find photos from past passengers showing exactly what the view looks like. So now that you know what to avoid, let's wrap this up with a quick action plan. Let's do a quick lightning round recap of the 7 cabin locations you should never book. Directly below the Lido deck, non-stop noise and chair scraping. Next to crew doors or galleys, 24/7 activity and clanging trays. Forward cabins on low decks, anchor noise and rough motion. Below or above nightclubs, theaters, or casinos, constant thumping bass. Near trash chutes, anchor storage, or tender areas, smells, rattles, and early morning chaos. Far aft or forward away from stairwells, endless walking and slower muster access. Obstructed view balconies under lifeboats. No sunlight, no view, no thanks. Any one of these mistakes can cost you hundreds in rebooking fees, ruin your sleep, or leave you staring at a lifeboat instead of the ocean. Pro move: always open your ship's deck plan PDF and cross-check your cabin before you book. If this helped you dodge a bad cabin, hit subscribe. Next up, we're breaking down which cabins are actually worth upgrading to. See you there.